In 1946, $1 bought you an all-you-can-eat spread at El Rancho Vegas, a meal designed to appease the howling coyote in your innards. That $1 gamble built an empire. At its peak, Las Vegas ran more than 70 buffets. Today, fewer than 12 survive. Executives admitted each one lost around $3 million a year. Then COVID gave them the perfect excuse to kill what was already dying. But the buffet was never really about food. It was a promise, and understanding who broke it starts with why it was made. Herb McDonald didn't just invent a meal, he rewired the economic engine of Las Vegas with a single, brash idea: feed everyone, all night, for $1. In 1946, as the neon started to flicker on the desert's edge, McDonald pitched his Buckaroo Buffet at El Rancho Vegas with a promise as wild as the city itself. The pitch was raw and direct, printed right on the flyers, every possible variety of hot and cold entrees to appease the howling coyote in your innards. The price, $1 with unlimited plates, wasn't a typo or a charity. It was a calculated risk, designed to keep gamblers on property long after midnight, their hunger sated and their pockets a little lighter after a few more spins at the slots. The Buckaroo Buffet wasn't about fine dining or culinary innovation. It was about volume, spectacle, and a kind of democratic excess. Anyone could walk in, pay $1, and eat until they couldn't anymore. The menu was humble: cold cuts, potatoes, beans, a rotating cast of desserts. But the real value was psychological. For the cost of a single chip, you got a sense of belonging to the grand Vegas experiment. The casino didn't care if it lost money on the food. Every plate was bait, and the real feast happened on the gaming floor. Internal records from the era show that for every $1 lost at the buffet, the casino expected to win multiples back at the machines. The logic was simple: keep people in the building, keep them playing, and the house always wins. Word spread fast. By the late 1940s, busloads of tourists were rolling in from Los Angeles, drawn by the promise of a $1.09 all-you-can-eat spread. The casino's advertising leaned into the spectacle, painting the buffet as both a cure for hunger and a rite of passage. The phrase "appease the howling coyote in your innards" wasn't just a slogan. It was an invitation to indulge, to be part of something bigger than yourself. For night shift workers, returning GIs, and families chasing luck, the buffet became a ritual. It was open when everything else was closed, a place where the clock didn't matter and no one asked how long you'd been at the table. Other casinos took notice. By the early 1950s, the buffet had become a standard feature up and down the Strip. Flamingo, Sahara, and the rest all raced to offer their own version, each trying to outdo the other with bigger spreads and lower prices. The math never really added up on the food alone, but that was never the point. The buffet was a loss leader, a Trojan horse that turned cheap eats into a loyalty loop. Guests lured in by the promise of a bargain meal found themselves staying longer, gambling more, and returning again and again. The $1 buffet wasn't just a meal. It was the cornerstone of a social contract between the casinos and the working-class dreamers who made Las Vegas what it was. That contract, as the decades would prove, was both powerful and fragile. On the outskirts of the Strip, a different kind of Vegas buffet took root, a place where locals gathered not for spectacle, but for connection. The Feast. Buffets at station casinos, Red Rock, Green Valley Ranch, and Sunset Station became more than cheap eats. They were the neighborhood's dining room, the reliable spot for birthday dinners, after-school celebrations, and Sunday brunches that did not break the bank. In these rooms, families marked milestones, little league teams crowded around long tables, and retirees nursed coffee refills over bingo cards. The food was familiar: carved ham, fried chicken, taco bars, endless trays of Jell-O and soft serve, but the real draw was that everyone could afford to bring the whole family. Union organizers and community leaders often pointed out that these buffets served as the city's great equalizer. For a couple of bucks and a player's card, a construction worker or a school teacher could eat like a king, just a few miles from the velvet ropes and $50 steaks of the Strip. The feast was not about luxury, it was about dignity. It was about knowing there was a place in Las Vegas where nobody judged your shoes, your job, or your luck at the tables. The comped meals, the $2 breakfasts, the free parking, these were not just perks. They were a promise, quietly renewed every time a regular slid a tray down the line. At Red Rock, Green Valley Ranch, and Sunset Station, the staff knew regulars by name. Birthdays were announced over the PA. The buffet line was a parade of neighbors, not tourists. When Station Casinos announced in July 2022 that all 3 feast buffets would be permanently closed, the reaction was swift and bitter. Local forums filled with stories from families who had lost not just a cheap meal, but a gathering place. Union representatives called the closures a betrayal, pointing out that these were the last affordable options for working-class families in Summerlin, Henderson, and North Las Vegas. One longtime guest wrote, "We celebrated every birthday here for 20 years. Where are we supposed to go now?" The empty buffet halls did not just signal a change in menu, they marked the end of a social contract. The spaces were repurposed for gift shops or slot machines, and the message to locals was clear: the casino no longer needed their loyalty. The feast buffets had been a fixture for generations, a place where the city's backbone came to relax, connect, and feel seen. Their loss was not just about food, it was about the slow erasure of community in favor of corporate efficiency and higher margins. The anger that followed was not just nostalgia, it was a response to a promise broken, a tradition bulldozed to make way for something colder, more profitable, and far less welcoming. Las Vegas casinos built loyalty not with spectacle, but with a system of perks engineered to keep people coming back. Free parking was the first invitation. In the 1970s and the 1980s, every major casino on the Strip offered it. No validation, no minimums. The message was clear: step inside, and you're already ahead. Cheap room deals followed, with nightly rates that barely covered cleaning costs. The real value wasn't in the rooms, but in making sure guests stayed under the casino's roof, ready to play. Once inside, the buffet beckoned. Endless trays of food at prices that seemed impossible, subsidized by the hope that diners would linger at the slots or tables. The true engine behind these perks was the Players Club, a tracking network that quietly recorded every bet, every hand, every pull of a slot machine. Early versions used punch cards, then magnetic stripes, and eventually digital databases. Each action earned points, which could be traded for more than just meals. Comped drinks, show tickets, even free nights. The math was invisible to guests, but not to the house. Internal memos from the 1990s reveal the calculation. The average buffet diner generated $25 to $30 in slot revenue, turning a loss on food into a profit once the loyalty loop closed. The cycle extended beyond buffets. $2 graveyard breakfasts, bottomless coffee, and the unspoken promise that loyalty would be rewarded. Free parking made it easy to return, and comped meals or show tickets discouraged wandering to competitors. The system was built on a kind of trust, an understanding that if you kept your play in-house, the casino would take care of you. It was a handshake deal, not just about squeezing dollars, but about making every guest feel valued. For decades, this loyalty economy was accessible to anyone willing to play, regardless of bankroll. A factory worker from Cleveland or a nurse from Bakersfield could spend a few hours at a nickel slot and walk away with a free buffet ticket, a room upgrade, or a parking stub that cost nothing. The perks were more than incentives. They were a quiet nod that every guest mattered, not just the high rollers. But the math was always delicate. The system depended on volume, the steady churn of millions of small stakes players. As corporate ownership consolidated and Wall Street demanded higher returns, the equation shifted. Free parking became paid parking. Room rates crept up. Comp thresholds rose. The buffet, once the heart of the loyalty system, became a casualty of cost-cutting. The invisible math that had kept prices low and perks generous began to unravel. What disappeared wasn't just a cheap meal, but the sense of partnership between casinos and the people who filled them. The loss was cultural as much as financial. When the perks vanished, so did the bond that once made Las Vegas a city for everyone. By the 1990s, the Las Vegas buffet had outgrown its humble roots. The city's biggest resorts didn't just feed guests, they staged a spectacle, each property trying to outdo the next in a culinary arms race that turned dinner into theater. At the Rio, the Carnival World Buffet sprawled across more than an acre, boasting more than 300 dishes on any given night. Lines snaked through the casino, tourists clutching pagers and eyeing the dessert station, waiting for their shot at snow crab legs and hand-carved prime rib. The Rio's buffet wasn't just a meal, it was a production, with open kitchens, sushi chefs behind glass, and a parade of international stations that promised the world for $20. Bellagio raised the stakes in 1998, opening a buffet that looked more like a luxury cruise ship than a cafeteria. Marble floors, live-action cooking, towers of king crab legs, and an ice cream counter run by pastry chefs in starched whites. The price crept up. $25, then $30, then $40 for weekend brunch. But the message was clear. This was Vegas excess, plated. Wynn followed suit, unveiling a buffet with 15 themed stations and floral displays that rivaled the lobby's famous arrangements. At Bacchanal inside Caesar's Palace, the numbers became almost comical. A $17 million renovation, 600 seats, and a menu that changed daily, featuring everything from dim sum to made-to-order soufflés. Planet Hollywood and Paris Las Vegas joined the fray, each carving out a niche. Le Village at Paris recreated a French village, complete with cobblestone streets and stations named for regions of France. At Planet Hollywood's Spice Market Buffet, the pitch was global street food, shawarma spinning beside tacos, and a dessert bar that seemed to stretch forever. By the mid-2000s, the Strip's flagship buffets had become destinations in their own right, drawing food critics and Instagrammers as much as gamblers. For a while, the numbers worked. Super buffets like Bellagio and Wynn could move thousands of diners a day, supported by armies of staff, sometimes over 100 employees per shift, from line cooks to pastry chefs to dishwashers working behind the scenes. The real stars, though, were the proteins, endless trays of crab legs, lobster tails, and prime beef, offered at a fraction of their true cost. These weren't just menu items, they were bait, drawing in guests who'd drop hundreds at the slots after dinner. The economics were never simple. Internal memos from the era, like the oft-cited claim by Caesars executive Tom Reeg that buffets lost $3 million a year, tell the real story. The house didn't care if it bled on the food line, as long as the slot machines kept ringing. Each guest who paid $30 for dinner was expected to lose far more on the floor, turning a buffet loss into a casino win. But the scale came at a price. Labor costs soared. Food waste climbed as chefs tried to keep every station brimming, even as crowds ebbed and flowed. The buffet, once a simple loss leader, became a high-wire act, balancing spectacle against razor-thin margins. Still, for a generation, the Super Buffet defined the Las Vegas experience, a place where a factory worker from Cleveland could pile his plate high with crab legs, raise a toast with cheap champagne, and feel, if only for a night, like a high roller. All of this excess sat on a knife's edge. As the bills stacked up and Wall Street's patience wore thin, the Super Buffet became less a perk and more a liability. But for a time, it was the beating heart of the Strip, a promise, kept nightly, that in Las Vegas, anyone could eat like royalty for the price of a chip. King crab towers and prime rib carving stations once defined the Strip's buffet era. But behind the scenes, these spectacles demanded an army. 80 to 100 workers per shift, grill cooks, pastry chefs, carvers, bussers, and dishwashers kept the operation running. Each crab leg and lobster tail was more than food. It was a statement of dominance, a costly promise to guests, and a mounting concern for accountants. Over time, the economics faltered. Labor contracts pushed payrolls higher, healthcare expenses surged, and the price of premium proteins like snow crab and prime beef climbed relentlessly. Every new station, every specialty chef added to the strain. Inside executive offices, priorities shifted. Tom Reeg, chief executive officer of Caesars, put it bluntly. Flagship buffets were losing $3 million a year each, a number that haunted industry meetings. Once casinos absorbed these losses, banking on slot play to cover the gap. But as slot revenue leveled off and investors pressed for better margins, the old logic collapsed. The buffet, once the heart of customer loyalty, became a glaring loss. Food costs refused to stabilize. Snow crab prices doubled in a decade, and over time, hours piled up. Staff, once a symbol of pride, now looked like excess. The magic number, 80 to 100 employees per shift, became a target for cuts. The retreat from the Super Buffet was not abrupt, but it was steady. Buffets that once set the standard began vanishing from balance sheets, their losses no longer tolerated. When the math broke, so did the promise. The question shifted, not how to outshine rivals, but how to exit before losses grew worse. In just 5 years, Las Vegas lost more than 85% of its casino buffets. The number dropped from over 70 before 2020 to fewer than a dozen by the end of 2024. The official explanations came quickly: public health concerns, labor shortages, supply chain problems. But the closures didn't reverse when restrictions eased. Instead, casino executives quietly made the shutdowns permanent, repurposing buffet space for slot machines, gift shops, or whatever promised a higher return. At the Rio, the Carnival World Buffet, once a sprawling acre of snow crab and prime rib, reopened as a food hall. The new menu features a $25 sandwich, a far cry from the $13.99 all-you-can-eat days. The logic is simple: fewer workers, less waste, higher margins. The food is better, they say, but the deal is gone. The same story played out up and down the Strip. Where there were once lines for endless plates, there are now QR codes, gourmet burgers, and a bill that can rival the cost of a show ticket. For longtime visitors, the change feels like a personal loss. One regular, who'd made annual trips since the 90s, put it bluntly, "I used to feel welcome. Now I can't afford to bring my family. I stopped coming." The promise of Las Vegas, a place where a factory worker could eat like a king, has been replaced by a paywall. The social contract is broken, and the city's reputation as the people's playground is fading fast. A few holdouts remain. South Point and the Palms still run buffets, stubbornly clinging to the old model. Their lines are longer than ever, packed with locals and bargain hunters who refuse to give up the last vestiges of what made Vegas special. For those looking for honest coverage of which meals and which deals are still worth your money, subscribing means you won't miss what is left of the real Las Vegas. The buffet's collapse isn't just about rising costs or changing tastes. It's about what happens when loyalty is traded for short-term profit, and when a city built on dreams decides regular people are not worth the investment. Today, fewer than a dozen casino buffets remain, down from over 70 before COVID, which served as the final blow, but not the true assassin. The real loss is a broken social contract. Vegas no longer rolls out the red carpet for the working class, just velvet ropes for big spenders. Behind each shuttered buffet is a promise erased. The gamble now, whether loyalty and community can ever return. Subscribe for more unvarnished Vegas stories.